a little bit of it. And here in northern Michigan, we really got the brunt of this ice storm. And the thaw has occurred, but it's now day 8. And my neighbors, just, a quarter mile from me, are still without power after 8 days and, below freezing temperatures much of the time.
That is absolutely scary. Like we had the ice storm, but before that, I didn't actually tell you this. We had snow, but we had probably 20 to 30 centimeters. So they're as tall as your door,
Yeah.
right? And to your point, like we had people come together to help each other because my community is older and many of them don't have children. So you can't even have the young child, son, daughter, whatever, right? So it's like 55, 60 retirement community. And I stand out in my 30s, but we all work together. And that's the beautiful thing about it. Like when people can come together, whether it's your neighbors or even like partners, right? And help each other out, you
Yes.
realize it's a blessing.
Yes, exactly. That's one of the things that we were discussing is that, these opportunities, these challenges in life, we can reframe them just like anything else. We can get stuck in the mud. And I can tell you, so I had actually been in Europe when the storm hit. And I was in Traverse City, Michigan, which is about an hour and a half south of where I live in Petoskey. And I had flown in. Things had gone from bad to worse. A lot of people had lost power this past Saturday, but then the winds and more snow and more ice hit, and then a lot more was falling, trees and power lines wise Saturday night and Sunday morning. So it went from bad to worse. People who could get out of their neighborhoods were all of a sudden unable to get out. They freshly didn't have power, and it was fascinating because one thing, you kind of feel some survivor guilt, right? Like when you're not suffering and your community is suffering, I'm thinking, okay, I'm in Traverse City. I have power, I have heat, but they don't, and you feel bad. But then I realized like you can't put the fire out from inside the house, right? You have to be outside the house to help put the fire out. And so, connecting with my community, what do you need? What do you need? And I went up with a full car, just stock full of, we call them loppers, the things to cut branches, chainsaws, which I'd never operated a day in my life before, multiple chainsaws, uh, 3 big cans of gasoline and oil and lubrication for the chainsaws, like all the things that I just never thought of having. I brought up groceries for people who had been without groceries. I brought up a generator and the requisite items you need for that. I mean, my car was just full of survival equipment that I had never thought about needing before. And I came into the neighborhood and met with my neighbors, many of which it was impassable. They couldn't get out. And we all came together and we took on passage after passage after passage of the main road to our neighborhood and then to the driveways so people could literally get out of their homes. I hooked up a generator. The scariest part for me actually was that my fish almost died because the dogs were out of the house, but my fish were stuck in the house with no power and no aeration. I walk in and they were just gulping the air. And I said, oh no. So I got the generator hooked up literally just for the fish. This new generator basically just kept the fish alive. And then by the time I came in to plug them in so that they would have aeration and the heater would go back on, they were floating upside down. And I'm tapping on the tank like, no, 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 live. And every time I would tap, they'd kind of, it was like a mini version of fish CPR, and they'd come back to life. And then the aeration started, and within 20 minutes, they were up and swimming like nothing happened. And I was so grateful. But the thing was that, no matter where we are in a situation, in a community, relationship, family, there's always something we can do. And there was a moment when I was in the hotel in Traverse City and I'm thinking, okay, I've got to go back to my house. I know the road's impassable. I know I have no heat. I don't know how to do any of the things that I need to do to fix this, but I have to try. And there were moments where I literally felt my mind almost like getting stuck in mud, like tires, right? And then the spinning started. And then you just have to quiet your mind and stop and say, no, we need to go onward. What can I do? I can be the fireman outside the house. I can bring supplies. And someone else can meet us there who can show us how to use the supplies, and on and on and on until what looked like something that should take weeks to clean up within hours we had everything free and passable so emergency vehicles could get in, so people could get into their homes and start the cleanup process that is going to be ongoing now for weeks and months here in northern Michigan. But it really, to your point, made me so grateful for the community and relationships that I have now in my life, because there was a different time in my life earlier, not really that long ago, where because of my own limiting beliefs and my own scarcity mindset about what I had to offer and what was accessible to me, I had not necessarily surrounded myself with people who would have helped, who would have reached out. And there were certainly times in my life where I was giving a lot and it was just leaching out of me, right? Now I so passionately lean into giving, but I also am surrounded by people who that is a relationship that goes back and forth. There's this unspoken reciprocity that really is a part of community that makes things work. If we're just out for ourselves and just doing everything in this moment to help ourselves, that may get us through today, but that's not going to get us through tomorrow. And it's not going to get us there long term. It's like in Mufasa. There's that song. Do you know Mufasa, the new Disney movie? Yeah. So the new song where they say, you want to get there fast, go alone, but you want to, what's the line? Do you know the line? You want to get there fast, go
You're
alone,
putting me
but
on the spot and I want to
I
use
know I'm trying to
Google
remember
so
exactly
bad.
how they said it. You want to get there fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, go together. If you want to go far, go together. And that has really been embodied in the community response and the response in the people dearest in my life to this really tragic event and difficult event. And it really translates to the work that you and I both do in coaching people, learning these tools, because these tools are not for a one-time use. They aren't just to get through this problem. They are going to serve you over and over and over again in life. You never know when, but they will absolutely serve you.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that because sometimes, and maybe you've gone through this, but I know I have gone through this years ago, whereas it does sometimes take an event to open your eyes and be like, man, this person over here, how did I ignore all of the behaviors that I didn't like that they were doing to me? I remember I saw there was like this interview and someone said that when it comes to friends, sometimes well, when people are close to you, sometimes you tolerate from them what you wouldn't tolerate from strangers. So is that a
Mm.
reflection on you or a reflection on the person who's doing it? And I sat back and I was like, you're right. Like there's like that sweet spot when it comes to how long you've known a person where you'll tolerate them mistreating you. Like the first couple of weeks, it's like, okay, you know what? I don't like it. You're very quick. But after 6 months, after 9 months, or in some cases, when some people sleep together, right? All of a sudden the
Mm.
blinders are on and they're like, I can't see any bad. And then when people are
Yeah.
pointing it out, they're like, oh, but this person does this. They treat you like this. They say these things. And they're like, okay, I don't want to hear it. So Schaefer, why do
Mm.
you think some people get stuck in not seeing it, even though sometimes deep down they know it, but they choose to ignore it?
I think so many of us, I think in general, human beings are egotistical in a sense, right? We see ourselves everywhere. That's why perception is perception, it's not reality, right? Your perception is what you see, and it's based on not only how your own brain is wired, which is going to be different from how someone else's brain is wired. So, like, literally, some people see colors differently, right? And they're not wrong. Their brain processes it differently. And that's just how their brain was wired. But now you add in traumas, family systems, what people have experienced, and you add in other issues like other medical issues or psychological issues. Now, the way one person's seeing something is totally different. So if we're bringing along with us this emotional and interpersonal relational baggage that tells us what we can expect of people, we collect people in our lives that remind us of the people that we never healed from, often, most often in our youth, right? Parent figures or other people that were really close to us in our lives that we depended on. And because we depended on them for our literal safety and survival, we couldn't necessarily control that situation and we couldn't change it. So the only person we could change was us. So we learned how to please that person, how to palliate the situation, how to keep them happy and calm, or as much as we could. And then we went out into the world and we saw people who reminded us of them. Now, if we sat down to coffee with our best friend, we might say, "Oh my goodness, I would never want to marry someone like my father or like my mother, whatever it is for you, right? Or like my stepmother. I would never do that." But as we all know, we recognize this feeling of home, this familiarity with people who remind us of the very people that we worked so hard to try to please, often unsuccessfully growing up. And so we collect versions of that person, and then we spend so much time and energy trying to prove to them and really trying to prove to that caregiver that we're worth something, that we're better than they thought that we were. But it's an unwinnable battle. And I like to say it's like being on a hamster wheel. You're running, you're burning all of your focus and energy, you're staring up front. You can't see all the opportunities and the good relationships and the good careers and the opportunities in your life because you're just so focused on running this unwinnable race because it feels familiar and your momentum in life has been going the same direction every time. This is the relationship you're repeating over and over again. And the work of coaching that is so beautiful and transformative is to try to pose curious questions and try to shift our focus from being so laser focused on running in the same direction. We may be at the point in our life where we say, ouch, this hurts. I'm wasting energy. This doesn't feel good. I can't keep doing this. But we often need help, or like you said, an external, really challenging event to be the impetus to say, okay, not only does this hurt, but I need to change. And that requires a change in momentum. And we know the body in motion stays in motion, but we need a change in momentum to just literally stop running in that direction and take the steps off the hamster wheel. But it's much easier said than done. But having that perspective and having those life events happen that make us stop, they literally physically stop us in our tracks, can be a step forward in a new direction that takes us where we actually want to go in life.
Do you then think that sometimes we stay, as you mentioned, because we understand it, we know it, but the new path, it's unknown. And for a lot of people, the unknown is scary. Could that be why we hesitate to make the changes in our lives?
Yeah, and I think, the body in motion stays in motion. It's funny. I think like we could go back to physics, which I don't know about you, not my favorite subject in school, but if we go back, if we go back to those topics, they translate into our psychological existence as well, not just the physical existence. And the same thing as, matter cannot be created nor destroyed, right? It's always there. Those pieces of us are always there, right? We can heal from them, but we also have to understand that they're always there. And we have to really intentionally learn how to navigate those emotions and those limiting beliefs so that then we can make really intentional choices so that we can leave. Because until we actually look in the mirror and we see reality for what it is, rather than being stuck in our perception, like you said, like, why have I been with this friend? Why have I invested in this friendship? And now when the chips are down, they're taking as many as they can get and they're running away from the threat instead of putting their chips in with all of us. And we're figuring out how to get through this so that everyone pulls through, right? When we have the opportunity to see that, that's when we can change. But we won't even perceive it unless we've done the work on ourselves to try to decloud our vision because we've been seeing with the same prescription our entire lives. And that's where that self-development work is so key and often happens in midlife because that's the time when hormonally we're changing, our frontal lobes are finally fully developed, and we're kind of starting to see life from the perspective of someone with a fully developed brain. From a neurologist standpoint, when you think about, we were talking off air, that it would be nice if, when you're 25, you could make good choices, but you know, your frontal lobe's barely fully online at that point in time. So there are some realities. We're navigating life with the tools we have, and we get to a point where, okay, I've got new tools. Now I can do better.
At 25, I thought going to McDonald's for a date was like the epitome of dating. And I'll share a funny story. In Canada, we used to have something called Toonie Tuesday because our $1 is called a loonie and our $2 is called a toonie. So back in the day, what I used to do is I used to schedule all my dates on Tuesdays. So it was $2. This is before I had a car. So it was $2 for the bus, $2 for dinner because you'd go to let's say chicken and fries or whatever. And then it was $2 for a movie. So I used to spend a whole whopping $12 on my date. But to your point, right? I didn't know any better because at the time I thought that was it. As I grew up and I grew into the person that I am now, I did so in a lot of ways because I wanted to, but because I had failure after failure after failure, right? And a lot of times I like to compare it to, even though it's not necessarily the same, to like people who have an addiction, where you
Mm.
have to hit rock bottom before you can climb your way up. And the rock bottom for me, for Shaver, for everyone else, it's different. Some people, in regards to women I work with, they literally have to be abused for them to leave, right? Either physically, financially, emotionally. And a lot of men go through that as well. But one thing I did learn was when they escape it, unfortunately, to your point, right? It's later on in life. And some of the people I work with, they would tell me that, Terrain, I'm too old for love.
Mm.
Love is something that you get in your 20s, in your 30s. And then I asked them, I was like, well, look at it like this. When you were married to this person who you eventually called quits because they were abusing you, when you're in it, you thought it was love. When you're out of it, you realize maybe it wasn't the type of love that I thought it was, right? So, Shiva, for you, when you're working with the people that you work with, in hindsight, do they reevaluate their relationships and say, okay, this is what it was. It's a lot different than I thought it was when I was actually in it.
Yeah. I will give an example. So when coaching someone, it's all about perspective, right? That it always goes back to perspective. And that's one of the beautiful things about art and movies and podcasts and music is we gain a new perspective. And sometimes and often, again, because the way brain works, we are very focused on our own lives and our own stories, and we're always trying to figure them out. So we can watch a movie or listen to a song or listen to a podcast and say, oh my goodness, I have a fresh perspective on this experience that I'm having. And so I remember coaching someone who was saying that, and this was such a pivotal moment in the conversation because I was aware of abuse in a relationship that they were experiencing, but they weren't aware. And it was not my place as a coach to say, you're being abused. It was my role to help them gain perspective on their situation in their own time and take ownership and feel empowered about how they wanted to respond to that. And it was something as simple. There were many, many clues and what we say often red flags, right? And we hear about that a lot right now. There were many red flags and clues to the outsider, but it's like that frog in boiling water, right? Like, why do we not respond for a long time? Well, because the water's it's just a little hotter and then it's a little hotter. But then often at the end stage of abusive relationships, we start to question because it's starting to hurt. It's starting to get worse enough that, ooh, it's starting to scald the skin. And then we say, ooh, what about that? And then all of a sudden, what often happens is something that was tenable becomes untenable because then the temperature really goes up. Because when you say, I actually don't like that you're doing that to me. An abusive person is going to try to increase the coercive control and make sure that you know where you belong, which is in that relationship under their control. Whereas a person that you have a good relationship with and a reciprocal relationship will say, oh my goodness, okay, well, they may have some issues with, deniability or accountability, as we often do. I didn't mean to do that to you, right? But a person in a healthy relationship may say that at first, and you say, well, I understand that, but this is how I experience it. And they'll say, oh, well, I don't want to hurt you. So even though I didn't mean to hurt you, you experienced it that way. Let's figure out a way to get through this so that I stop hurting you. Because the last thing I want to do is hurt you, right? That's a healthy relationship. But when you're in a relationship that coercive control and abuse is present, that's not what happens, right? So they turn up the temperature. Now the water is boiling. And what do you do? So for this particular person, one of the ways that I was able to help them have a different perspective. I like to do a bird's eye view of examples, right? So they were explaining to me how they would park and how their partner allowed them to park their car closest to the house. That was kind of that was a sign of them respecting them. It takes me less time to bring in groceries and things. That was their perspective, and that's what they had been basically told what was happening. But as they were explaining their days, what was happening from an outsider's viewpoint was everyone else parked their cars at the edge of the driveway and could leave, could come and go freely. And this person was trapped. They could never leave because there was always someone in their way. But it had been framed for them, oh, look, you're so lucky you get to park closest to the house. But they were literally